What is cracking, Hope Nation? It is your friendly neighborhood, Kevin Hines, and I'm here today on the Hindsights podcast with a very special guest who I'm uber excited about. Kara Mayer Robinson is a licensed mental health counselor and the host of Really Famous, a podcast and YouTube series featuring candid conversations with celebrities about their personal and professional challenges, including, but not limited to, their mental well-being. An Ivy League graduate from Columbia University, Kara has built a successful therapy practice in New York, working with clients in entertainment and far beyond. Kara is known for her work as a mental health advisor on film sets. She helps keep productions running smoothly while supporting the well-being of talent and obviously crew. Kara is also a very prolific writer, contributing to outlets like the New York Times and the Hollywood Reporter, and she frequently speaks on topics related to mental health and wellness. So book her to speak today. Now based in Los Angeles and New York, Kara brings her best friend energy and therapist instincts to events, creating engaging and impactful and important discussions. She interviewed her friends like Cesar Millan, the dog whisperer, Kiss band king and legendary entrepreneur and sometimes inappropriate man himself, Gene Simmons, and the incredibly hilarious and candid comedian Pete Holmes, to name a few. Kara truly is one of a kind, and we couldn't be more thrilled to have her here with us on the Hindsights podcast. Kara, welcome to the show.
Love the intro. Thank you, Kevin. I'm so happy to be here. It took a little while to get this timed out well, but it's great to see you, to see your face and be chatting. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. And yes, it has been a minute. I think we canceled 4 times, so pardon the mishaps. But here we go. Let's get right into it. I really would love to know this very first questions I have for you. How did you go from working in finance to hosting a celebrity interview show and consulting as a therapist on TV and movies?
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty long story, so I'm going to try to give you the short version because how does that happen? My major in college was accounting, believe it or not. People always laugh when I say that because I do not have the personality for it, but that's what I went into. So I worked for a bank, I worked for Comedy Central, but once I was at Comedy Central, I kind of realized this is not a fit because I was crunching numbers still, but then my colleagues were coming into my office and putting their feet up and telling me all their problems. And I was like, oh, this I like. So I went to grad school and I got myself a master's and started a therapy practice in New York, started writing on the side, and then one day kind of realized I should start a podcast. So I did. Started interviewing celebrities because I've always had a passion for TV and film. And the rest is kind of history. It turned into a YouTube series, YouTube channel. And this is what I do now. I take my therapist skills and I help people feel comfortable and feel better. And sometimes at the end of the show, they say things like, all right, how much do I owe you? Which makes me feel good.
That is one of the most amazing stories of transition I've ever heard. And it's really awesome how you've turned this into a beautiful career and how you've actually been helping a lot of people through their ability to tell you their truth, maybe sometimes for the very first time, which is really incredible. And not just telling you, but telling the world. You host a podcast and YouTube series, a show where celebrities open up to you and often reveal their very personal mental health issues. How does being a therapist come into play in those situations?
It's like everything I feel because it helps people, like my experience, my understanding as a therapist and how people are and how to be with people and help them feel safe. It helps my guests feel comfortable and not judged because they're not judged. I'm never judging people when I'm talking to them. And contrary to what a lot of people think, I'm also not analyzing people that I just meet in conversation. People, I think, have this fear that because I'm a therapist, I'm analyzing them. I'm analyzing them in therapy and sometimes in an episode of Really Famous, sort of putting some pieces together. But then I tell them, I say what it is that I see. And so if I connect the dots, I say, oh, well, here's how your father and the way he treated you probably is impacting the way that you're being a parent now. So I do connect the dots a lot. And sometimes they have these insights and they feel comfortable enough to share. So I've had some people reveal some pretty personal things, and I feel privileged that they feel comfortable enough to say it. It is a change because as a therapist, everything's confidential within the session. And here we are doing these shows, which are the exact opposite. They're being broadcast to the world. So it took a little bit for me to get used to that, honestly, because I didn't want my guests to feel like they were going to be put in a vulnerable position. But then I realized I actually felt good doing it, and they were felt kind of relieved to be able to talk about these things.
Incredible. Why did you decide to become a therapist? What was the impetus to doing that?
So a lot of therapists start out because they want to figure themselves out.
Mm,
So that is not my story. I have always been very self-aware and interested in figuring myself out. So that was like a natural thing for me that I enjoyed doing. And I think it was like when I was at Comedy Central and these people were coming to me and opening up, and I was like, this really feels like the kind of thing that I could get into. And to be honest, I was also watching this show, the Bob Newhart show. It was on reruns on Nick at Night at the time. Bob Newhart was playing a psychiatrist, and had people come into his office and tell him their problems. And I was like, I feel like this is something I could really get into. And when I did it, I knew, oh yeah, this is totally for me. The entire universe is built on psychology.
mm.
So everything that goes on is all about people, how they feel, what drives them, how people relate to each other. So it's fascinating to me. And I love when people connect with me and they feel comfortable enough to open up to me.
I love those two aspects of it. You saw the Bob Newhart show where he's playing the psychiatrist. You were in the situation in Comedy Central where people were coming to you and telling you all of their truth, and you realize I could do this and I could make a world of difference. So that's incredible. By the way, I wish you could have interviewed Bob Newhart. He is incredible.
Oh, I know.
Not many of my or the younger generations know about Bob Newhart. But if you don't know about Bob Newhart and you want to laugh your heart out, look him up like ASAP, like right now.
Yeah.
Okay,
And
so
Kevin, it's not that I didn't try, believe me. I did reach out to his reps on multiple occasions, but it just, they said he like his rep was like, he's just not doing interviews anymore. But I tried.
that breaks my heart, but I'm glad you had the inspiration nonetheless. What have you learned as a therapist? And are there certain issues that most people struggle with that you're aware of?
Definitely. So, what I have learned is that most people, even without mental illness, like any kind of disorder, most of us go around with like struggles and issues. So everyone struggles, no matter how easy somebody's life looks on the surface, there are struggles within. And I can tell you that almost everything comes down to self-esteem issues and relationship issues. Like those are the two things that float to the surface for me. And that has become my specialty as a therapist is working on those things. So a lot of it boils down to that. And I do also believe that a lot has to do with how you were brought up and messages you may have received, even if they weren't intentional messages from anybody, parents, teachers, whoever, it influences how you develop. So sometimes it's about connecting the dots and figuring out, well, why am I struggling with this? And oftentimes it has to do with you. So one of the things I've learned as a therapist is that you really can change your whole life. Like even if you feel victimized, even if something really hard happened to you, you absolutely you are the person who can change everything. You might need a little help from a professional or for somebody who's really supportive, but everyone can change. That's what I've learned.
I love that. That goes so against the old misnomer that people can't change. And if we put in the time, the effort, the energy, and the hard work, anything can change. But hard work because nothing could ever came without it. That's how I look at it. What have you gleaned mostly from being such a prolific celebrity interviewer and really a confidant?
Yeah, so let me get back to what you just said. Also, I want to add something on to that about people changing. So that is absolutely true, as I said. And there's sort of this new field emerging of surrounding neuroplasticity, which is the concept that you can rewire your brain. And so you can change these pathways, even if you have these patterns that are going back to when you were little. You can keep going on those patterns, but if you decide you want to change them, you can. So you can actually create new pathways and new patterns on top of the old ones. So it's really exciting. I'm not a big science person, even though I'm a therapist. I'm more like intuitive and that kind of thing. However, it's really cool to see that all of this research is supporting this idea that you absolutely can change, but you have to want to. But if you want to, and it's not even that hard. That's the thing.
Yeah.
It doesn't even require like the hardest work. It just requires a decision to do things differently and to change. And then boom, you can do it.
I love that perspective, and that's crucial for people to know that the about the neuroplasticity in the brain. And as we discuss that, there's something else to be kind of talked about, and that is, given what you do every day with sharing these incredible stories of celebrities and having them be honest in their pain with you and with the rest of the world that sees these interviews and listens to them. Stories are 22 times more memorable than statistics or facts. And there's an art and science to storytelling, and people that tell stories with help seeking factors or behaviors inside them can actually help people who are listening, viewing, watching, reading those stories to develop new neural pathways to find hope and healing and recovery in their lives. So every single time you interview someone that is a celebrity that has an incredibly powerful story, like Cesar Millan, who talks about his suicide attempt, talks how he got past that, talks how he found light at the end of the tunnel. You are giving an opportunity for people that are at home listening, watching, that are struggling with those same ideations to say, if Cesar can do it, I can too, and I can remain right here. And you're making a world of difference with those interviews, which is incredible.
Totally. And thank you so much. I appreciate it because I don't always think I'm having an impact. I always think that they do or somebody else does. But I appreciate the fact that, yeah, you telling me that, yes, by me bringing these interviews out, that I'm helping people. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And interesting about Caesar because that interview gets a lot of play. And on a daily basis, there are comments coming in. And this was a year ago that I recorded it, maybe even a little bit more than a year ago. And he does open up about attempting suicide. And it's incredible how much it has helped people. I can just see it in the comments. So yes, and I think that's the big thing is many people think that their struggles are only their own and they're alone in the world. But when they see that other people are struggling, because most other people don't show it, right? They're not going to open up. Regular people you meet on the street aren't going to tell you all the things that are going wrong in their lives or how bad they feel. They're not going to say it. So it's like, and the last thing you think also is that celebrities have these problems, but they sure do. So for a celebrity to open up and say, hey, this happened to me and this is my experience, it's pretty powerful. So yeah.
It's powerful, it's moving, and in the way they present themselves on your show specifically with the kind of questions you ask, it's empowering to change, which is really cool. Does it sometimes feel strange when celebrities reveal their deepest, darkest struggles in such an intimate way, yet it's being broadcast for all of us to see and hear?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's when the therapist in me comes out, actually. So there's like two sides of me, I guess, talking at the same time when somebody reveals something. So many times on my show, celebrity has started to cry or tear up. So it's interesting because if you're a podcast listener and you listen to my show as a podcast, you're not going to know that's what's happening.
Mm.
If you're watching on YouTube, you are going to see that happening.
Yeah.
But as a therapist, I also know that I have to give them a chance to feel that. And I can't just jump in and worry about that radio silence. So the therapist in me does come in, give them room, give them space, and then talk about it afterwards. So it really can be like a therapy session that just happens to be for everybody to see. Who said that? Recently, somebody just said it at the end of a show. I forget which guest it was, but they said, so this was like, oh, it was Zachary Quinto. He's in the show Brilliant Minds now on NBC. And he said at the end, he said, well, this was like a therapy session for everybody to see. So yeah, it's interesting, but it can be like that.
Okay, very good. Another very popular video of yours is your talk with former runway mentor Tim Gunn. What is so special about him and this interview?
Yeah, so Project Runway, he was the mentor. Tim Gunn, everybody loves Tim. I loved him. I mean, I watched Project Runway back at the beginning. He's not on it anymore. He and Heidi Klum have a show called Making the Cut. Tim and I, actually, Tim was kind of the impetus for me starting my show because I was writing a story about him for the New York Times when I was doing freelance writing. So I was covering his Sunday routine. There's a short little column that runs in the New York Times every Sunday, and it picks somebody from any of the five boroughs of New York and what they do on a typical Sunday. So I went to Tim's apartment in New York and I asked him what he did on a typical Sunday. So, of course, that could take like 25 minutes and you've got the whole routine. But I sat there for 3 hours and we were talking and talking and talking. And it was like, oh, I just loved it. I came back feeling like all these endorphins. And I was like, this is my favorite thing in the world. And my husband was like, you should start a podcast. Like you could run this whole thing as a podcast. And I'm like, oh, I'm in the background. I don't want to be at the, who wants to hear my own voice? Forget it. Well, I've gotten over that, as you can see. But back when I started it about like 7 years ago, that's how I felt. And so anyway, maybe a year later, I decided, okay, I'm going to give it a shot. And so I went to Tim and I said, hey, Tim, would you mind? I'm starting a podcast. Would you be my guest? And he said, sure. So I went to his apartment again. And again, it was like a 3 or 4 hour talk and it was wonderful. And he is somebody who has struggled. He struggled quite a bit as a child. And yet he's so lovable and so open to people, right? Some of the things that happen when you're growing up is if you were not treated that well, you might block yourself off, protect yourself, what you think is protecting yourself from people, put up those walls and push people away. Well, Tim did not do that. He opened himself up to people, and that's why people love him so much. But he also doesn't sweet talk. He doesn't mince words. He says what he feels about things. So when we talked about all of that. We talked about how we really felt about the judges on the show. Like he was dishing on stuff that he never, like people had never heard him say. They would never think that he couldn't stand most of the judges on Project Runway, but he couldn't. He was in defense of the contestants mostly. So he and I stayed in touch over the years. And then I decided I wanted to do a little update with him about a year ago. So we did a little bit of an update. And in that talk, he talked about being bullied as a kid. And he came to some insights also like on my show about like why didn't my father ever teach me how to fight? So it's interesting because I was able to show him that he stood up to Harvey Weinstein. Harvey Weinstein and Miramax owned Project Runway at the beginning. So long story short, Miramax and Weinstein were trying to screw everybody over, including the contestants and Heidi and Tim. So Tim was appalled by this. And so he stood up to Harvey Weinstein, who we know was the biggest bully. And like hardly anybody stood up to him. So as I'm talking to Tim, he tells me this whole story about what Harvey had done, the trickery and all. It wasn't sexual with Tim, but it was just contract type of stuff and money and that kind of thing. So then Tim had told me that about being bullied and how he was like, why didn't my father teach me any of these skills? I used to come home bloodied and bruised, but I didn't know how to fight. But I was able to show Tim, well, you just told me this story about how you stood up to Harvey Weinstein of all people. So somehow you learned how to fight. So it's like sometimes you see yourself, you have these narratives about yourself and things that you can't do, when in reality, there's proof that you actually, those narratives aren't always true, and that
Right.
maybe you do something that you think you can't do. So a lot of that, again, is the rewiring of your brain that you need to do when you have these paths and these beliefs of, well, I can't fight. I'm not powerful. I'm so, wimpy or whatever. And like, look, actually, no, that's not true. So start to look at that evidence and start to see yourself accurately.
Wow, that just kind of hit me because, well, first of all, I can't wait to go back and watch your interview with Tim Gunn. That's an episode I haven't gotten to yet, so I'm looking forward to watching that in all of its interest. But I was heavily bullied in grade school and high school, mostly because in my grade school I was the only mixed race kid in the school. I'm part black, and the eighth graders tormented me when I was in fourth grade because of it. They would literally pick me up during recess, turn me upside down, and place me in a garbage can face first, and tell me that's what I was because I was part black.
Oh
And
my God.
I dealt with that growing up, and there was kids that because I didn't look like them, they would get behind me, bend down, someone in front would push me over with the guy behind me. I'd crack my head open on the concrete and bleed because I didn't look like them, and it really was brutal. And I have to say, it played a pivotal role in me attempting to take my life off the Golden Gate Bridge at 19 because I built such a standard of self-loathing for so long, and my self-esteem was gone for such a long period of time, and it really impacted me growing up. Not no pity needed, just that's what happened. And I have to say, the way particularly my mom handled it is she would say, because they would beat me up too, and she would say, "Don't hit back. You can solve everything with words. Turn the other cheek." And it was really hard for me not to naturally fight back. But as I got older in that school, I realized that, she was sending me every day in my lunch bag little sticky notes that said, "You are worthy. You are loved. I love you. You mean the world to me." And so no matter what the outside world was doing in that school, no matter what the other kids were doing, how they were tormenting me, whatever age they were, I always had that lunch bag to go back to and to know that I was important. Um, and I think that was really how she got me past that, I guess, bullying phase in my life, which was so crucial. And I really have to say thank you to her. And I do let her know that, but she really got me through that. I wrote a children's book, The Dimly Lit Star, set in space with Mama Shines and Little Shines, these two stars where the mother star gets her star son through bullying in space school, which was just something I put together because it came to me in one day. It came to me actually in a moment. I wrote the whole book after seeing what looked like a star on my door. It was my wife's hair dye that had gotten on the door and it made a stain, and it was the shape of a star. And so the book came to me in like seconds. I wrote it down, and it's been helping a lot of kids get through their own bullying and build resilience in the face of pain. So I can relate to what Tim Gunn went through in that situation, and I really appreciate that you guys had that conversation. I'm gonna watch. I literally am gonna watch it after we get off this podcast.
Yeah, great. So your mom also, I think about your mom in situations like this. It must have been so hard for her too. And I'm guessing she wouldn't want you to know that at the time, right? But it must have been so painful for her too. So she's probably still carrying around some of that pain as well. But it must be so wonderful for her to see how far you've come out of all of the pain and for you to be able to take your life and do something so generous with it for other people. I mean, it must just blow her heart up to see that it all worked out okay in the end. So, love to your mom for that. And really can only imagine what those struggles were and for her. And the other thing is it's also so common bullying, like so, and not
Yeah.
just a little bit of bullying, but a lot. So a lot of people have told me about it on my show. I think you and I were talking about Harry Hamlin, who is a recent guest on my show. He said he was severely bullied growing up also. And this guy he was on the cover of People magazine as the world's sexiest man or whatever. And then I had Reed Scott, who he's on Law and Order right now. He was also on Veep. He played Julia Louis-Dreyfus's right-hand man. And Dan, like the ass. Sorry, can I say that? I don't know if I can say that here. He was okay, okay. But he played like a total ass on Veep. But he was so great because he's not like that at all in real life. So he
Yeah.
told me about being so severely bullied that he had to change schools. His parents had to remove him from his school. And he's not the first person, celebrity, who has told me this either. Again, so it's like,
I had to go to another school for eighth grade. I couldn't. I was broken at the first school. I was done, and
what are
that's
you talking about, by the way?
mom came in and my mom was like, "Do you want to move? Do you want to go to
Yeah.
your school?" I was like, "Mom, get me the hell out of here. I can't do it anymore." You know,
Right. Because
what
that's a struggle too, I'm sure. Like trying to think of, well, what is the best thing? Like, do we want, I'm just thinking as a parent, what I would be thinking in your mom's shoes would be like, okay, well, I want him to be strong and I want him to know that he can make it through things. But at the same time, it's like I can't have him step into an environment that is so
yeah,
hazardous for
yeah,
him. So I would think I would do exactly that. Like maybe, say, well, how do you feel? What do you want to do? And yeah, like remove somebody from an awful environment. Like that is just a rule number one. If somebody is, it's not necessarily the person, it's the environment. So if the environment is awful,
yeah,
get the hell out of there.
yeah.
And so, especially as a kid.
Yeah, I have countless stories from that grade school that I was in. It was a Catholic grade school, and I'm a Catholic today, and I believe in God. I have a firm faith in God. I've always had it, always will, and that's my prerogative. But when I was there, even the teachers were brutal because, frankly, a lot of the teachers there was the principal, in fact, at the time. On the day I decided to move schools in seventh grade, she saw me, my friend Paul, and my friend Francisco walking down the hall. We all had our shirts untucked, Catholic school, tucked in shirts, sweaters, the thing. All had our shirts untucked. And she literally went, and now Paul's white, I'm mixed, and Francisco's Filipino. And she goes, Kevin, Francisco, tuck in your shirts. Paul, go back to class.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, no, tuck in your shirts and detention. Paul, go back to class.
Just blatant. I can,
Blatant,
oh,
blatant. And that's just one story of 1,000.
yeah.
I had a situation where, and this is, I'll be embarrassed here for a minute. I had a situation where Mrs. Lyons, may she rest in peace. Seriously, I've forgiven her, but I had to go to the bathroom. I had to go really, really bad, and I was in fifth grade, and I said, Mrs. Lyons, I have to use the restroom. No, Kevin, sit down and be quiet. Mrs. Lyons, I really got to go to the restroom. No, Kevin, sit down and be quiet. Mrs. Lyons, Kevin, be quiet. And I went in my pants. Most embarrassing thing you could have happen as a fifth grader in front of all the other students. What a mess. And all she had to do was let me use the restroom, you know?
Like, oh, I just that makes me so
Yeah.
upset. And that the impact that that had on you, yourself, your self-esteem socially, and then for years after, you still remember it, still comes up, even though you don't think about it every day. So if
Yeah.
only people would think, sometimes like, an adult, you have to think before you speak to or in front of a child.
Yeah.
It's so it can cause such damage. And at the same time, on the flip side, some adult who is wonderful and healthy and can show some sort of love or appreciation or support, respect, whatever it is, to a child who doesn't get any of that can also be so powerful. Like I
Yeah.
was just talking to somebody yesterday about the fact that she was telling me about some nieces of hers who have parents that are difficult, like really difficult, but they for some reason opened up to her a little bit. And so I was like, the amount of power, like the good impact that you can have on them is huge. So like
Yeah.
be there for them if you desire that. If you want to and you feel like you can have a huge impact. Either way, you can have a huge impact.
On that note, I think it's important to point out a really great teacher I had. And
Please, yeah.
I would love to hear if you had a great teacher as well and kind of go back and forth because in high school, my favorite teacher of all time was Mr. John Fennell. He was my hero. He was my friend. He was my mentor. He was like a second father figure to me. He was a great man. He was tough on us kids in the theater program because he was such in his world a perfectionist, but he was such a great man. Tragically, he lost his life to suicide, it's heartbreaking because I'll never forget going to the funeral. But but during our time with him, he had a very special presence in my life, and there's this thing where he still I I see him in my dreams often, and like he'll come down visit me and say kind things, which is just it's very special. However that works, it's something to hold on to truly. And he inspired me to be the best version of myself, which I really appreciate. And I just have to point that out to anyone who knew Mr. Fennell, who may be listening or watching. Let's remember him and let's honor his memory.
Yeah, I love that. And that's another thing too, is when you have to know that when somebody's gone, like they still are with you in so many ways if they really meant something to you. So it's like even though physically you're not going to see them again, they can have such an impact on you and they're part of you. Like they're part of your personality, they're part of your dreams and part of the messaging that you have in your mind. So yeah, we're not when we're done, we're not done.
Not done. And those memories we have, the hundreds of memories with that person or those people that really impacted your life, if they're gone from this physical world, you can remember them by sound, touch, smell, sight. There's things you can see and hear that can, bring on a memory of them that's just so beautiful, which I really appreciate. Can you tell me, because now I'm talking about myself, I got to stop doing that. It's
I love it.
your episode. Can you tell me about, if you can, about a teacher that you loved and the impact they had upon you?
Sure. I mean, I was pretty lucky. I was very lucky growing up. I have two incredible parents, and they were both educators. And they just celebrated their birthday. My dad's birthday was Sunday. He's 92. My mom is 82, and they're still like the most supportive, wonderful people. So I had them growing up, and so they really had the biggest impact on me. My teachers were all, up and down, whatever. I had one teacher, I'm going to say the bad one too.
Oh,
One
good.
teacher, second grade, Mrs. Sangillo. Like I used to finish my work really quickly, and I was very shy as a kid. So I would finish my work and I wouldn't know what to do with myself. And so she basically just made me sit there and wouldn't let me do anything, read a book, anything else. And she made me feel bad for finishing my work early. It's a little bit of a weird story. She could, I could have had a much worse teacher than that, but that's just that I had a really bad, I did not like it at all. My mom had to come in and talk to her and be like, oh, can't Kara do a little bit of reading or something after she's done with her work? Best teacher, fourth and sixth grade, Mr. Tuvey. We had these autograph books at the end of sixth grade when we were going off to middle school, and we would have all our friends sign the autograph books, and the teachers would sometimes sign. So I gave it to Mr. Tuvey, and he wrote in it, Dear Kara, it was a pleasure having you in class. You have a lot of potential. Look this word up.
I love that. That's incredible.
So guess what though? I took that with me. Like I believe him. So it's
Yeah,
like the things people say, you can have an impact on people by telling them something like that.
a massive impact. Our words that we choose for the people around us have consequence, have reactions, and make a difference if they're positive, hopeful, meaningful, powerful, moving, and kind and compassionate. This is so cool. I love this. Okay, back to the celebrity interviews stories because we got to get into the rest of it. But can you tell us which celebrities surprised you the most by what they revealed during an interview?
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost always surprised to be honest. Like I go in with no assumptions or judgments ahead of time. So I really like to go in just to meet somebody, like almost as if we're just meeting for the first time on a date or as a friendship setup or whatever it is, an interview, what a job interview, whatever. So they almost always surprise me and are nothing like I think that they're going to be. Yeah, I mean, in terms of surprising, I think Suzanne Summers is maybe one of the people who surprised me the most. I don't know if young people are going to know who
I
Suzanne
know who
Summers
she
are. Does
is.
everybody know?
We know who Suzanne Summers is. You bet.
Okay, good. So how do you like what makes you know
Well,
Suzanne Summers? I'm
didn't
curious.
she? Is she? Correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't she do the Thigh Master?
Yeah,
That was
yeah,
her, right? She had a prolific career in entertainment. She was incredible. Yeah, no, she. Yeah, tell me all about
yeah.
her.
So she's a badass. Like she was an entrepreneur
Before
early on,
early.
before everyone. Yes. So she was on the Three's, she was on Three's Company, right? And then she got fired off Three's Company because she asked for equal pay to John Ritter.
Wow.
So yeah, so they decided the network executives or whoever was in charge decided they were going to make an example of her and say, you know what, we don't even need you, so bye. So she was basically fired because she wanted equal pay. And so she and her husband just kind of created this other situation for themselves. And they started these shows and she started the business things and the Thigh Master. And then she had like 17 books or something about aging and whatnot. And so to the end, the two of them were really just kind of business people and inspiring. And they kept talking to people. Anyway, so she had, when I interviewed her, it was right before COVID, and she was kind of what I felt like going through the motions and saying all the things she had already written in her books and already said in interviews before. So I remember sitting in the interview, like a little bit like, she's like, she could be talking to anybody. She doesn't even, there's no connection here. Like she doesn't care. She's just like spewing things. Lo and behold, she shocked me because at the end, she started crying and like couldn't believe she was getting so emotional. She's like, you really brought out these things in me. So my radar, I guess, was off that day. And I didn't know that she was experiencing these real feelings inside of her as she was telling her stories. So she opened up quite a bit and emoted even more than she opened up. She just emoted. Something was striking a nerve. She was talking about her husband. I suspect maybe, again, this would just be gossip. I have no idea. Maybe she had an affair or something. I'm not sure because something came up as she had regrets with respect to her husband. And so she did become very emotional. So by the end, she was all like, there's something about this conversation that was really emotional for me. So that was surprising.
It's surprising and it's great that you reach folks like this on such a deep level, which I think is incredible, which is, I think, why everyone who isn't on your podcast watching right now needs to get on board and listen and view and subscribe and get involved.
Yeah,
How,
love it.
how do you use social media to spread your mental health awareness, and where can people find you if they don't already know?
Yeah, so I do a variety of things on social. So lots of times I just do what's going on with the show. So I'll talk about who I'm about to interview. And then, of course, I'll have clips from the show. I also started sharing little mental health tips, like a therapist tip. So there's one that I put up yesterday, I believe, about the fact that you don't always have to be happy, right? Like everybody, sometimes you stress out because you're not happy enough. Oh, I should be happier. Well, happiness is only one emotion. Like the human experience involves all different emotions, good and bad. Embrace them all because that's part of life. It means that you're living life, even when you feel awful, like you're living. So sometimes I'll put tips like that up. And then it's interesting because a friend of mine who I met through the show, Daisy Fuentes, she was a model and an MTV, a VJ for a long time. So
Yeah.
she and I became friends after she did my show a couple times. And so we were having lunch a couple months ago, and she was like, we were talking about the fact that I'm now going on movie and TV sets to support the actors in this thing. And so she said, you should really think about bringing some of the therapy into social media. So, for example, like, why don't you ask your celebrities for what their therapist taught them? Or maybe she had said, why don't you ask each guest if they've been in therapy? And that was good. But then I was like, you know what? I'll ask them for a tip that their therapist shared with them. And then I realized I had already done that a bunch of times. So now I'm starting to run those. So I looked back at an interview that I did with Jamila Jamil recently. And so she had this great little nugget that her therapist told her. And I shared that on social media. So on TikTok, I'm sharing a lot of those things, and they're doing well. Melissa Benoist, who played Supergirl, she
Sure.
opened up a lot about intimate partner violence. So that's actually another
Well,
big one I knew already that she had talked about this openly. So Melissa played Supergirl on the CW series. She was also in Glee, and she was in the recent HBO series, The Girls on the Bus.
yeah,
So she had opened up about, sorry?
I've seen all three of those. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So she was like the lead in The Girls on the Bus, and
Yeah.
as you know, Supergirl. So people look up to her quite a bit. And so a few years ago, she opened up and put this video out on social media saying that she had been in a relationship, married to somebody who was physically abusing her. And so she opened up about it, and I was so impressed with her for being so vulnerable. And you could tell she didn't want to do it. She's a shy person, she's quiet, but she felt like she needed to do that to share it with other people who may be experiencing something similar. So even though that was a few years ago, I brought it up in the interview and I said, do you mind talking a little bit about this? And so she did talk quite a bit about it. And then I shared some of those clips on TikTok. And they all, just like Caesar Milan, like it really went wild. Like people were commenting and they were really like, thank you so much for sharing. I can't believe this is what it was like for you. And it moved them. And then there were other people who were in that situation and they felt validated a little bit that again, it could happen to anybody. So I ran that on TikTok and I realized these little pieces where celebrities are revealing these things need to be shared.
Yeah.
So, because there are a lot of these experiences that other people have, and it's helpful to see that they're not alone. So, yeah, so I will put those little things on social media as well. And then I'll put advice from my celebrities therapists, putting those on social media. And I put my own advice as a therapist also on social media. So I'm mostly on Instagram and TikTok.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook as well. It's not quite my thing as much. I haven't gone to Twitter in a while. So sometimes I'll just post something there. But mostly, if you want to check out my stuff, it's on Instagram and TikTok at Kara Mayer Robinson. And YouTube, of course.
Kara Mayer Robinson on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, sometimes on Facebook. We will add that to the show notes after the show, so you'll be able to click on that whenever you want to enjoy Kara's incredible messaging. from her show and the connection you'll see between her and the incredible guests that she has on, which is awesome. Kara, if you could give podcast listeners one piece of advice, what would it be?
I think that would be you can change. You can do what you want. You don't have to sit in your misery. You can live a better life that feels better to you. And it's totally in your hands. It's not about what the world has given you. It's not about the people in your life. It is about you. Like you are the one who has the power. So you may need support and help, direction and guidance. And that can be from anybody. That can be from a really supportive, amazing friend. It can be from a wonderful family member. It can be from a professional therapist. Get that person or those people and have them support you as you make changes in your life because you can do it yourself.
You got this, folks. You better be listening very carefully because she's telling nothing but the truth. Okay, Kara, last three questions. One, what is your biggest asset? And then two, your biggest liability. Let's start there.
Okay, my biggest asset, I would say, is my connection with people and it's all part of the same thing. Like I think I have it and I also love it and I want it and I use it and it rewards me and it rewards them. So it's that ability to connect with people. It has helped me in every part of my life, I would say. My biggest liability is maybe that I need change like all the time. So I am not a fan of routine. I'm not a fan of doing the same thing always. So I'm a little restless with that, which is probably an asset too. Like if I were in a job interview, yeah, I could say that and turn it into an asset, right? Isn't that what you're supposed to do in a job interview? So I could do that because I guess it has helped me.
You're hired.
Great. I guess that's how I got in this weird path to what I'm doing right now. But it all feels like you're right because it's come together. There's a reason I have this history, and it landed me in this spot. It didn't land me, but it helped me get to this spot. But yeah, sometimes I think it would be better if I could just chill out and like the routine of things. Not a fan.
Okay, gotcha. Finally, Kara, what would you say to the layperson who is struggling with their mental and brain health? How can they find hope and healing?
Okay, so for sure, professional help. Like if you're really struggling, don't struggle alone. I know before I said that you can change yourself, but again, that's with support. So if you're really struggling, it's hard to pull yourself out of that. It often takes somebody else who can do it and who knows what they're doing. So here's one of the things about social media too, is like you can see a lot of people on social media giving advice and telling you how to live and how to be, but not all of those people know what they're talking about and are qualified. So you really want an educated, trained, skilled therapist to help you with those problems. So I would go straight for a therapist. And if you're not sure how to find a therapist, it's not always, I'm going to tell you, it's not always easy to find the best therapist, which is why you have to keep your mind open and try different therapists. Like if you don't hit the right one right away, that's okay. Try another one. I don't mean to skip around from therapist to therapist. Find one though that you can trust and who feels like they can help you. So you can talk to friends, you can talk to people who you trust, family members. And again, almost everybody has a therapist now. So it's not like a thing that you can't say. Do you know a therapist? Do you know a good therapist? Just ask everybody that. And you can also ask your doctor, and you can also, of course, go through your insurance company, see who's covered if you want to go through insurance, but then vet them, like check them out. Where were they educated? What are their specialties? And that sort of thing. A lot of therapists don't take insurance directly. It makes it a little bit harder to access it, but there are therapists out there for you. So just go find one. Keep looking. Don't give up easily.
Go find one, keep looking, get professional help and services. If you're in a bad mental health place and you need the help, which you so desire and so deserve, I want to shout out a friend of mine, if you don't mind, Kara, Tay and Taylor Lautner run the Lemons Foundation. Taylor Lautner was the wolf in Twilight for his Twilight fame. He's an incredible guy. They do the Squeeze podcast, which is beautiful. But I'm shouting out for a very particular reason. The Lemons Foundation is a 501c3 nonprofit that takes in funds to give back to people through free therapy for youth who can't afford it. So we want people to know that if you want to support a great cause and give back to people who help people heal, they're a great way to do it. And then, Kara, before we wrap up, I was hoping that you could share any of your resources, the things you're doing, the work you're doing. Where can people go besides just your socials to get involved with the work you do?
Yeah, sure. So also just one other message is you don't have to suffer for the rest of your life. Like you will be amazed no matter how bad you feel. It's like you were saying, like look at how low you felt in your life. Lowest of low. I mean, and but you came back from that. So you don't have to feel like that. It's not a sentence for how you're going to be the rest of your life. You don't have to sit in misery and suffer. You can do something about it. And it's amazing how powerful help can be, professional help. So yes. Okay. So for me, the best way to get me is through my website, actually. I have two websites. So for the show, so the show is called Really Famous because I interview famous people, but you know me, I'm after who they really are. So it's Really Famous. So you can go to really-famous.com and all of the info on the show is there. My YouTube series is also called Really Famous. So it's youtube.com/reallyfamous. And then my professional site is hollywoodwellness.org. So that's where you can learn a little bit more about my therapy practice, my coaching. A lot of work that I do is actually more coaching oriented because I'm also, well, some people have mental illness that needs to be addressed in therapy with those sorts of skill sets. At the same time, a lot of people just struggle with self-esteem and relationship issues and want to live a better life. So we can do coaching with that. So that is at hollywoodwellness.org. And then, as you said before, my socials are at Kara Mayer Robinson.
Let's go over that one more time. hollywoodwellness.org, youtube.com/really famous, really famous, really underscore, really dash
Dash.
famous, really dash famous. Get involved with Kara Mayer Robinson. She's absolutely incredible. It's been a blessing and a gift to have her on the show. Thank you, Kara, for doing this show. And everybody watching, listening, viewing, subscribing, be here tomorrow, every day after that. You are valued. You are loved. You are worthy. And you matter to us. Keep going. Thank you, Kara. I hope you have a great day. And I hope to talk to you again real soon.
Thank you so much, Kevin. You are a gift. And thank you for everything that you give the world. And it was a pleasure being on the show. It's an honor. Thanks for having me.